I'm super happy to have on Panama City, have Commissioner Brian Grainger on as a guest. We are working through all of the commissioners and the mayor, and we're going to do some other leading city officials. But I appreciate you bringing on today to talk about things and to talk about being a commissioner, to talk about the town that we all love. And so thanks for being on, Brian.
Well, thank you, Kevin, for
Can I call you Brian, or do I have to call you Commissioner?
Yeah, absolutely. it's still, it's still weird. That pomp and circumstance to me is still a little weird. Mm-hmm. I'm just a guy.
Yeah. And by the way, the other commissioners we've interviewed so far, and I'm sure all the other ones, and probably the mayor too, are going to be like, it still feels weird on your ear when somebody says Commissioner so and so, or that because you don't see yourself that way. You see Brian from Panama City, I would imagine. Right?
Exactly.
You mentioned your military background, but if you would just kind of give us a short history of how Brian Grainger ended up a commissioner in Panama City. Like, why'd you choose to do this in the first place? How'd you get there?
Oh man, so I just retired from the Air Force. I retired out of the Air National Guard. I'd done 10 years active duty in regular Air Force, and then my family and I had decided to move back here, and there's a full-time Guard unit out at Tyndall with the 601st, and so I worked full-time with them, and then retired out of that. And so I started paying more attention to what was happening around in the city, or not happening rather, and I felt like our area wasn't really being represented very well, and so I decided, well, somebody should do something about that. A lot of people don't. A lot of people have that same sentiment. They have that same mentality. They look at it and they go, hey, there's something needs to change. But you have to be willing to put yourself up to a lot of scrutiny and a lot of harsh people out there. You live to some degree in a fishbowl. When my colleagues and I are on the dais, we're talking, every bit of that is recorded and has to be saved for 10 years. So it's
heavy.
It is heavy. And you kind of get used to it. At first, I think if you were to go back and take a look at when I first started, I was very hesitant to weigh in on things. Very, kind of just wanted to think through it because I just didn't want to I didn't want to say something and not fully understand the issue, if that makes sense. So now I'm a lot more comfortable with it, and I'm a lot more comfortable on the backside of that, of understanding the issue and asking those questions and trying to get at the root causes, maybe why we're making this change or why the change is being asked of us. If that makes sense.
It makes total sense because we are, as a town, I tell every time I see one of you all or anybody in this, I said, you all are making historic decisions. Like, you're making 40 years worth of historic decisions, all in a matter of a few years because of Hurricane Michael, right? I mean, all these things have come to the surface where normally we were like, let's tackle the Martin this decade, and then let's tackle, right? All the big ones are on your plate right now, and you all are having to sort through them and make big decisions on what we're going to do.
Yes.
What's that feel like?
So I go to different conventions. I'm about to head out next week to another one where I go and talk with other city leaders throughout the state of Florida. And one of the things that usually comes up is I tell them, I say, well, I'm just ready to get back to things that cities do normally.
Potholes. You're ready to get back to potholes, right?
Yes. They're talking about, hey, how are we going to best use our infrastructure dollars? Yeah. And we're over here trying to figure out how to rebuild 2 marinas, and a Martin Theater, and a Civic Center, and
infrastructure,
a rec center, the Martin Luther King Rec Center, and infrastructure that was already bad before the hurricane, and then got worse because of the hurricane. So it's we have no shortage of problems, but I'm glad that this commission is willing to lean into them. So. Yeah, there's an answer out there, but it's not necessarily going to be the answer that everybody wants. Because everybody doesn't want the same answer.
Exactly right. That's not going to happen no matter what. Let's back up a second. Which ward is yours?
So Ward 3 elected me, so I serve the city at large, but I answer to the citizens of Ward 3. And none of those issues, with the exception of infrastructure, are in Ward 3.
So tell us the general boundaries of Ward 3.
General boundaries of Ward 3. So Frankfurt Avenue is the west side boundary. 19th Street is the southern boundary. And then the eastern boundary goes between Jinx and Harrison. It just kind of bounces back and forth upwards from 19th Street. All the way up to Candlewick area.
Yep.
Candlewick, the neighborhood is included.
Yeah.
But past Candlewick is all county. And then I have kind of what we affectionately refer to as Alaska, which is Panama City North, because on in the schools you see Alaska, and Alaska looks small. It looks kind of small next to all these other states. In reality, Alaska is huge. It's almost as large as half the United States, and that's how Panama City North is. On the maps, because there's not a lot of development up there, there is some development up there, and we're thankful for it, but there's just not a lot. And on the maps, it shows like it's smaller, but it's really the size of the rest of the city.
No kidding.
Yeah, it's huge.
Your ward alone is the size of...
Geographically, I have the largest ward by far.
Wow.
By far.
Okay.
Now, numbers-wise, for people,
sure,
I have the smallest ward.
Well, it seems like the general trend of Panama City is to develop north, right? I mean,
it has to.
It sort of has to. We're landlocked everywhere else, right?
It has
and
to.
then water on the south, of course.
And we do not forcibly annex anybody in. That's I mean, legally, I guess we could, but we have no appetite for that.
No.
So we could try to expand north, maybe east a bit, but we're not going to do that. We'll do that as people want to, as property owners want to. We'll welcome them, but we're not going to force anybody into that.
So is the new Publix up 231, is that in your ward?
It is.
Okay, all right.
It
So
is.
you have the new...
Liberty.
Just thinking of
all those apartments up there.
Mm-hmm.
All that is they're all my constituents.
The Sweet Bay.
Sweet Bay.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So you have, I mean, even though you have the one of the lesser populated, and you have some things popping in there. Yeah.
The wards get redistributed every census. Census is every 10 years, and we kind of recently had one. So we expect the next census that my ward will be about 10,000 people. And right now it sits at about 6,800.
Okay.
And each ward has to have the same amount of people. It has to be pretty close. They have to be within 3% of each other.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
See, I didn't know that. Okay, because I own property in Millville, and we used to be under the downtown district, and now we're in the Glenwood sort of. So used to, Jenna Halligus used to be my commissioner. Now Janice Lucas is, and so I was that. Okay, I didn't know. I knew there was a reason for that, of course, but I didn't know that was the reason. Okay,
it's one of those
a population
things that
thing. Okay.
probably nobody has thought about.
Yeah,
maybe 4 people in the entire city have thought about, but that's how it works. Is every census they have to take a look at what the population of each ward is, and if they're within a certain percentage away from each other, they have to redistrict.
Gotcha. Okay.
And that goes through another process.
It would have to. Yeah. Oh my goodness. And you, so yeah, you have some of the newest and certainly most newsworthy. Like certainly, Sweet Bay has changed the game for what residential looks like.
Oh yes.
On the Panama City side. So talk about some of the hot things going on in your ward right now.
So hot things going on in the ward. We got Sweet Bay. We got Liberty out there. There's another development coming in called Park Brook that's just north of Liberty. So we're happy for them to come in. My ward is mostly commercial along 23rd Street, and then it's all houses for the most part. I'm trying hard to get Chapman Park fixed up, and the city just doesn't have money for it right now. We have 55 parks in the city. 55, and the average for a city our size is 16.
No kidding.
No kidding. We have 55 of varying sizes, right? Some parks are as small as just a regular lot. Some parks are
like Gateway and McKenzie right across the street here.
Yeah,
right? They're not that big, but they're there.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, they're not that big, but they're there, and we have to support them, right? And so we're trying to sort through that one because we have way too many parks for a city our size for the amount of money that we're able to bring in. And I have 3 of them in Ward 3.
Okay,
Out
so
of 55, I have 3.
Wow.
Yeah.
I tell you what, though, that
It
is
was.
news to me also, which is why we wanted you on. Well, is because even as somebody who I follow this stuff relatively closely, I think, or try to, just in the last 5 minutes, I've learned probably 3 things about the city I did not know.
Yeah.
So for instance, because again, I own property in Millville, right? And so that park, that waterfront park there on Watson Bayou is a, like I can see it from the front yard of my place. And so and there's another one around the corner on 3rd Street that it's easy to think when some of these parks aren't maintained the way we want to go, why can't you just get the city out here?
Yeah.
Because we have, like, it sounds like
Yeah, you got
3 times more parks, 4 times more
you got
parks than the average city our
70
size.
people.
Wow.
70 people in Quality of Life, which the name has changed recently. But yeah, 70 people. Why can't you keep it mowed, right? We got 55 different parks.
Wow.
You know, it's a lot, and some of them demand more than others, right? Like one of my parks is Venetian Sunset Park. It's small. It's probably smaller than this building. I mean, it's definitely smaller than that park there. It doesn't need a whole lot, you know. But another park is the Harvey D. Mathis Walking Park. It's the
Joe
largest
Moody.
one.
But big, yeah.
Right? I mean, it's the largest one in Ward 3.
Oh, Ward
I should
3,
say,
yeah.
But yeah, it's so when we're seeking, you know, even so I'm seeking $120,000 for Chapman to kind of turn it back into baseball. It was a huge baseball park, and you know, we went to the Little League World Series back in the '90s, and there's a lot of folks that are still around that you know played on that team and were part of that. So when I look at the city and I go $120,000, a lot of money, me and you, but you know, to a city with a $70 million budget, $120,000 is not a lot in the big grand scheme of things. And so, but just trying to squeeze $120,000 out of a budget is virtually impossible. So yeah,
Because I would imagine too, you know, you're right. $70 million versus $120,000 is not a big deal until you start adding up all the people asking for $120,000 here
Exactly.
and $150,000 there, and all of a sudden it starts to eat. And how do you make those decisions? So how do you make those decisions? Because y'all are making those decisions. Like, so talk me through this. I mean, one thing we learned when we were talking to Commissioner Lucas was I didn't know you all are, by default, you're on the Destination Panama City board,
Yes.
and also on one of the transportation boards. Like
the
you're just
transportation board, yeah.
Yeah, it's not just you don't show up once a month at the, you know, at the government building and do your meeting. You have these other responsibilities that
Yes.
are part of the package of
Yes.
this job. So just when you went into this job, one, I guess, did you know all that stuff? And then how's that been learning, and like, how do you make these decisions?
So I knew that there was as part of campaigning, I learned that there was other boards that I'd be a part on. I didn't fully understand all the different boards. There's more to it than those are the 2 big ones. But like, for example, I'm basically the delegate for the city of Panama City for all League of City things. And so there's a Bay County League of Cities, there's a Northwest Florida League of Cities, there's a Florida League of Cities, there's a National League of Cities. And so I attend all of those things and try to network and figure out solutions to certain things. And obviously those conversations are different depending on, you know, Northwest Florida League of Cities is more like, hey, have y'all had any success with Triumph? You know, you know, Bay County's more very hyper local, like, you know, what have you heard that's coming out of the county? How can we best work with the county? That kind of thing. Whereas Florida is more legislature. That's more state legislature. You know, like, you know, Orlando and Panama City don't have a lot in common, but we do have some things in common.
We get hurricanes.
We get hurricanes.
Yeah.
We both go to the same legislature for, you know, hey, don't make this law. Hey, make this law. Hey, give us money for these things. You know, we have similarities there. And then national is, I mean, that's
Sure.
same kind of concept.
And so part of your job is to travel to these conferences,
yes,
you know, and just learn and gather. Okay, all right.
yes, yeah.
In addition to being on the board of these other things, and in
and
addition
meet-
to being okay,
meet
wow.
folks. So like some of these folks, like one of the folks I met was Retail Strategies. Met them at Florida League of Cities conference. Talked to them, and they were like, "Hey, we're a contractor. This is basically what we do. Cities hire us to help manage their business part of it, because a lot of times in cities and businesses don't necessarily see eye to eye on things, right? And they have different motivators, and so they help. And so we've recently hired them to go help with the mall, right?
Okay.
So
To
that was
facilitate, to try and get it to move forward.
exactly to bring them back to the table and say, hey, you know, what is it that you need to have here, or you know, because we'd rather use carrots than sticks. right? I think this commission, and I've told staff, and I've heard it from the other commissioners for the most part, that we'd rather use carrots and sticks on virtually all of our problems. You know, the city does have the authority to use code enforcement. And some people would argue that we probably should, and we have already on the Sears property, but we'd much rather incentivize somebody and say, hey, what do you need to do to move forward? That's a much better solution for everybody involved than it is to go in there and just demo the building and leave them with a tax bill.
Is the mall in your ward?
It's not.
Okay, but that's clearly.
Oh, it's an eyesore.
That affects
Yeah.
everybody.
With the
right?
exception of JCPenney's and Dillard's, who've done a great job at restoring their portions of it. It's an eyesore.
The city doesn't own it.
It doesn't own it.
Yeah.
Nor do we have the money to buy it. Because a lot of people say just buy them all. Like, okay.
Sure.
As soon as we go to start doing that, that price is probably going to go up too.
Yeah. But even then, imagine just the cost of buying a mall.
Even if we had the money to buy it, then we wouldn't have any money to do anything with it.
Right.
It's.
Right. So it's more negotiation with the property owner. I mean, how can we help you? Because you can't force them. You can, code enforcement obviously, but you can't force them to develop it. You can't.
Correct.
Right. There's nothing you can say.
Force them
Build
to develop
something
it.
now. Yeah.
We could condemn it. If code enforcement deemed that it was, it's got to go through a process. There has to be due process to this. But a solution, one that we don't necessarily want to go down, would be a condemning, and then the city would pay for it to be demolished. But again, we don't want to do that. We don't want to go down that road. We would much rather them develop it and turn it into a profitable, functioning piece of property. That's where we'd rather be. There's properties downtown that are in the same boat. That are just completely empty and have been empty for years. So it's the same concept. How do we get somebody to realize or be incentivized to rent this thing out to start being a productive building within the city.
And just one last thing on the mall too, at least the way I've read and understood, to make it even more complicated, is there isn't one owner of the mall. There's the person or the entity that owns the sort of center section.
Yeah, there's 4 owners.
And then there's 4 different owners. So even if you can't just bring a bulldozer around and start knocking things down next to, say, JCPenney's wall, there's going to be lawsuits flying like crazy.
Of course.
Yeah. So they all have to agree on what happens on that, right? Is that the
not
idea?
necessarily. JCPenney's and Dillard's, I don't think necessarily have to agree what happens with the Sears building.
Okay. But they do their envelope, like their
yes,
building.
They own JCPenney's and Dillard's owns their buildings, and as far as I understand it, they're actually some of the highest producing stores in the state of Florida. Because if you need a pair of nice dress pants and a nice dress shirt, most people that live on this side of the bridge are going to go to JCPenney's or Dillard's to get it.
The shirt I have on currently is JCPenney.
Yeah.
I go there like once every year or two, and because I know my size and I know I wear this button-down thing to work every day, and I just go buy like one of every color, and I'm good for 2 years.
That's funny. That's funny.
So I'm happy JCPenney's open back up.
So we don't necessarily want to mess with them by any means. They're doing what they're supposed to be doing. They're being great partners with the city. You know what I mean? They're productive. So we would never want to harm them in any way, of course. We don't want to harm anybody else either. It's just kind of.
It's the first thing you see when you come down 231.
Exactly.
I tell you, the way I see it, or just personally look at it, it's like the marina property. It's like one of these signature places.
Yes.
It's the center of town. And so it's not something that you can hide. Everybody sees it. And it sets a tone for the rest of the...
It does. It's that broken window kind of concept,
window.
right?
That's it.
It's not necessarily a window that's broken, but that's the same concept where those windows are boarded up and the building is just derelict, and it's just... man, there's so much potential there too. So much potential.
There is, and I tell you, and you've probably heard this from people in your life. I know I hear it from people in mine. I live in Callaway. I own a property in Millville, a rental, but I live in Callaway. And people in Callaway for years have been like, build us a movie theater, build us a Publix.
Yes.
Bill, why won't they just build it? And I'm like, well, if business is actually really simple. It's like, if I can make money doing this, if I have a reasonable chance to make money, I will try to do that.
Yes.
If they haven't built a movie theater in Callaway, They probably can't make money with a movie theater in Callaway. So it's easy to look at the mall and go, develop it.
Yes.
It's like, well, these are smart. It's frustrating. I'm frustrated. I hate looking at that darn thing. But these people are not dumb. They know if they could develop and make money, they would be developing right now. I would imagine.
So we don't know what their books look like, right? And we're not gonna
I'm not
ask,
going to show
right?
them to you.
They're not going to show them to us, right?
Right.
But when I say incentivize, I'm talking about like, they're probably going to have to put millions of dollars into that building in order to make it habitable, in order to figure out what they want to do with it, right? Well, for example, I believe that building is in a CRA, Panama City North CRA. So if it is, then we've already given them a TIF rebate to where if they were to put at least, I think for that one it's $500,000. It's a very, very low hurdle for them. $500,000 if they increase the value of the property. As they increase the value of the property and as it gets assessed, we'll share the TIF revenue with them.
So TIF
is tax ad valorem taxes.
Okay.
So the amount of money that we would take off of them for paying their taxes, the incentive is dump money into this property to make it more valuable, and for a set amount of time, we'll share what that amount that you're going to get assessed back with you.
Okay.
And it's not something that's going to cause companies to trip over themselves to come in here to develop. But if they're looking at, hey, do we spend our dollar here, spend our dollar there?
Could make a tipping point.
It could be a tipping point, yes.
It's kind of like, so years ago, my rental in Millville, 12 years ago as a matter of fact, I put a roof on it, and the CRA reimbursed me half the cost of that roof because it was in, it's in historic Millville and all that stuff. So it sounds like something like, it's a way to go, hey, the city's not investing in it, they're not building it, but they are giving you something to, that carrot you're talking about.
A lot of times people point to something like that and say, well, you're just looking out for the big guy, but no. You said you've had a rental in Millville.
1,000 square feet.
And it's in a CRA, right?
Yeah.
So if Millville is a $500,000 increase. So if you somehow were able to improve that property and get your value up and show that you've invested over $500,000 into that property, you would get the same deal.
As the mall.
Yeah,
that's cool.
And obviously, that's a lot harder for you to do with a 1,000 square foot home. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, if you're looking to buy a couple of properties together and you're looking to invest, that's really what it's meant to do. Part of that's just math. If we set that at $100,000, then we're going to have to pay a bunch of accountants to figure out how to give you $7 back every year. So the juice isn't worth the squeeze with the smaller dollar amount. If that makes sense.
Okay.
Because that was something I was chasing after. That, and then I finally realized the math just doesn't make it worth it.
That makes sense. So let's go on to some of the big hot signature projects going on in town. We talked about your ward a little bit, and the big things going on there. You have been very. You started did you start that Facebook group on the Civic Center?
I did. Yes.
Okay, so you started this Facebook group about the Civic Center when we were as we're still trying to figure it out, and you've been very good about monitoring that. And matter of fact, I saw a post you made the other day. It was like, hey guys, our conversation is starting to stray. Like, keep it focused on the Civic Center. That's a normal Facebook group thing, of course.
Yeah, of course.
But you've been very engaged in there and answering people's questions and commenting, which I appreciate. This is a guy who follows that group, and I'm watching, and I'm like, what are they doing over there? So since that one is clearly important to you, enough for you to take that time and focus just on that, or that in addition to all the other stuff you have going on. Tell me, we know we're going to demolish it, right?
Yes.
Tell me some of the thinking, and then I think you were the one too that proposed that on the heels of that decision to demolish it, that you put out an RFP to start already looking for companies that can help us do the next thing there.
Yes.
Because I'll tell you that there's a guy from the arts community, that was just our concern. It's like they're going to knock it down and we're going to forget there was anything ever there and we're never going to have anything. So talk a little bit about that project and your perspective on it.
So like I said before, Ward 3, we just need infrastructure, right? We need infrastructure. We need our roads, water, sewer fixed, right? So that's not headline news. That's not the sexy stuff. Mm-hmm. Roads and commodes is just stuff cities do, and that's not something that people really get excited over, right? But looking at all the major projects that the city was faced with, I saw the Civic Center and I was like, man, like a lot of people, I looked at that and I said, you know what, it's got good bones. I think we could probably save it. I think we could, do something with it, right? So I created that page to just start a discussion just about it, about that one building, and started. So what I didn't want to do is use data that was, and I'm not trying to disparage anybody who's worked on this previously, but there was a group that was brought in to look at that and to build a new one. And the whole idea was that it was going to be torn down and we were going to have a new one. Well, just from a data standpoint, some of that could have been biased towards tearing down, and whether it was intentional or not, if that was the plan, then we might have tossed data sets that said that we could have saved it, right? Because you're solving for X, we're not solving for Y. So I wanted to bring in a group of people who had nothing to do with the project, who had nothing to gain by what they have to say. So that's what we did. We brought in some of those folks from the original team because they've spent a lot of time on it already and they had a viewpoint of it. And we also brought in people, and I had a person from the local community who was in construction join in with that group. And so I thought we had a really, really good mix of professional people who have been in construction, structural engineers, architects, folks who can raise money, those types of people who would be needed to work on this project. We looked at it through a new set of eyes. We said, look, we understand that there was this building that we were looking to build, but it wound up being way too much money. We're not going to do that. So how can we use this building in another way? And how much would that then cost, right? Just ballpark. And so they came up with several unique ideas, and unfortunately, all of them, after we started figuring out what they would look to cost, all of them were plus $60 million or more. So that then runs into a problem.
In a town with a $70 million total budget.
$0 for that.
Yeah, and $0 set aside for that. Right?
Yeah.
Right.
And so a lot of times people say, well, what about, wasn't it insured? Well, yeah, it was insured, just like every other building in the city was insured. And the previous commission took a settlement. And so they took a settlement, which means you don't get all the insurance money that come off of it. And so they ascribed $11 million to it, which $4 million or so went to abatement that we didn't even see. The insurance company just debated it and then just didn't give us the $4 million.
Said you're welcome.
That's part of the insurance contract, right?
Sure. Right?
And so people start trying to follow the money, and it's like, well, it's really difficult to do with that because there's an $11 million yes that we've got. FEMA says we're going to give you 12. That's not how that works. FEMA says we're going to give you 12, but we'll only give you more than what your insurance gave you. You have to deduct that from what we gave you.
Gotcha.
So if they say 12 and you get 11, then you're only getting $1 million. That's how that works. So people then say, well, you got 11 here and 12 here, and they try to add them together. And that's not how FEMA works.
Okay, that's the first time I've heard that explained that way.
Yeah.
That's a big one for me.
Yeah.
Okay, so FEMA pays net, basically. They pay
Yes.
the difference. They don't give you a check for that full amount. They pay the difference
Correct.
of your insurance. So basically the total with those two together is going to come up to like what FEMA would have given you, if they just cut you a check for the whole amount. But there's no, got it. So there's no, I did not know that. In
Yeah.
other words, in the ballpark of something like 11, 12, 13 million dollars is what we were going to have.
That's
period.
basic. And then
Got it.
roughly 4 of it got used without us.
Right.
Without
so
our
the insurance
consent, so to
company
speak.
did, preemptively spent $4 million
Yes.
to like seal the roof up and make sure it didn't get worse.
And
So-
that went to the balance of the 11
Yeah.
because insurance paid for it. And so FEMA rolls in and says, hey, we'll give you 12. Tell us how much the insurance paid. 11 is what they paid. Okay, so we're only going to give you
But
one.
they don't, and they don't
Yeah.
even give you the break where it's like, can you pay us that 4? Can we like?
Nope.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we roughly got about $12 million total.
So is this fair to say? I mean, please tell me if it's not, because this is this is a sensitive thing, I want to make sure the words are right,
Yeah.
is the idea that, because everybody cares about that place. That it's all coming from a place of we really care and we want something special there. But if
Yeah.
we said we're going to rebuild that building the way it sits right now, bottom line, it sounds like we would have had $7 million ish,
Yeah. Yeah, about
right?
that. Yeah.
To rebuild that entire thing
Yes.
to something.
Now, mind you, if COVID hadn't happened, right, then the dollar would have spread a little bit further, right? We've had massive inflation here recently as well. So, I mean, we're talking 2018 dollar is valued higher than a 2024 dollar.
Sure.
A lot, right? So, I mean, it's not so much that the things in the grocery store are becoming more expensive. It's like your dollar is worth less,
Right.
is really what it boils down to. And a lot of people don't internalize that one.
Right.
But yeah, you're right. Yeah,
Okay.
7 million, which again is now valued less
Right.
than it was.
Than it was even then. But even
then.
in 2018, $7 million was
Not enough to do.
not going
yeah.
to fix that building.
We
Okay.
could have done an amphitheater and then done something.
So
Pretty
bottom
nice.
line
Yeah.
is that the only possible solution is new money from somewhere.
So stepping back, the previous group, right after Hurricane Michael, that building probably should have been knocked down. But FEMA engineer didn't even step foot in the building. They didn't even step foot in the building. They said, no, it's not. I think they said it was 42% damaged.
Right.
And then they left. Well, they're not like an insurance company where we can just sue them. So we took them to court, and we lost.
Yeah.
And the one judge, I mean, if you can go back and you can read his rebuke, I mean, it was scathing. But we lost. So, yeah. So that kind of, you asked earlier, how do you make decisions? Like, how does this, and that's a key point when we're dealing with something that is FEMA. We can't just sue FEMA if they do something we don't like.
Yeah.
We've got to take them to court, and it goes before a 3-judge panel who may rule completely not in our favor.
And that's final.
Exactly.
That's it.
That's final.
Yeah.
It's done. Like there's nothing else we can do with that. But moving forward, I called 2 different companies that do performing arts refurbishments. Like this is their entire company. This is what they do. Just talking to them over the phone. One guy, I told him, I was like, hey, this is me, this is what I'm doing, this is what we're looking at. And he's like, well, how old is the building? I said, it was finished in 1960. And he didn't say another word. He said, other than tear it down.
Yeah.
I said, what do you mean tear it down? He said, listen, I'm on 6 projects right now with municipalities that have buildings that are that old, but not older. And they keep throwing money at it, and we're still nowhere close to being finished because we keep finding things that need to be done. We keep finding problems, or the scope keeps changing. So he said,
means more money.
Which
That's translation,
absolutely.
more money.
He said, he said, what are your estimations on it being fixed? And I said about 60 million, and he said, then you need to save up 120.
Wow. Okay.
And this is a guy who does this for a living.
And because again, I questioned that decision. So this is just full transparency.
Yeah.
This is helpful because I'm a business guy, and so I know how to make a sales pitch. And if my sales pitch is
Don't hire me.
don't hire me
Yeah,
or
yeah.
save twice the money you think you need,
Yeah.
that's the worst pitch on earth. Right?
Yeah.
That's a guy that's just being honest, like, guys, if you want to do this.
Yeah.
So in other words, this is not a guy who's clearly hunting to get this job.
Exactly.
Matter of fact, yeah, okay. All right. That's good to know.
And so then I talked to another person who raises money for these things, and he basically told me the exact same thing. And those 2 people don't know each other, and I don't provide information to these people. I don't say, hey, tell me this thing needs to be knocked down. I'm like, hey, this is me, this is what I'm doing, this is our building, how much do you think it would be to save it?
And they're like, stop it. Yeah,
It's so like what I found out when I was dealing with the money raisers, the people who raise money professionally, right? There was 2 separate ones. I don't think they know each other. They might, but they don't know. There was no
They didn't
relation.
have these
there.
conversations
Yes.
together with you, right? Yeah.
So I talked to one. He told me, yeah, you're never going to get the outside money to invest in this. And they think that we could get about 35 million out of the local community to do something. So when you're talking about 35 and needing 60, potentially 120, 35 is just that's the problem that those other municipalities ran into. Was they thought they were like, okay, well 35 that gets us close to 60. You know, maybe the numbers are probably different, but the mentality is the same. Was we can get close, and then they just never quite get there. And then as inflation goes up, or building costs go up, or as whatever, you know, life happens, the costs just keep going up, and they're never able to actually finish.
Yeah.
So rather than that, a new building, while it's not immune to those forces, it is inoculated to some degree against it. You know, there's you can bond nobody's going to bond on a refurb. Nobody. Like, it's just not. They're not going to do it, you know, because they don't know what they're getting into. But a brand new building, construction companies will bond all day long. Yeah. They'll do that because they can run their math and go, I can make money off of building this building. I know what I need to do. I can get those contracts in place ahead of time, and we can do this.
The way you articulated it in this RFP, the idea, because this is going to lead into the marinas in the Martin, MLK, and some of these other big projects where you all have moved some money around it.
Yes.
You know, very controversially, right? So the idea for with the marina, and then the Marina Civic Center, the Civic Center property, then we'll move to the actual marinas. The idea, the way I understand it, is hire a company that knows how to build these things, the performing arts centers, and also knows how to operate them and make money on them, and let them compete over that spot. Is that fair, or
you're almost there?
Okay.
Performing arts centers don't make money.
Gotcha. Okay.
There's 3 in the nation that make money. Outside of that, they almost always have to be subsidized, which is okay. Their value is in from a financial standpoint. Their value is indirect.
It's quality of life, culture.
No, just finances.
Oh, just pure numbers.
Just pure numbers, right? So you can make the argument that it's going to enrich the arts. It's going to make it for a nice place for people to want to be here. You know, you can go down that road, and that's a Berkeley road to go down. We just can't quantify that road, right? Like, I can't quantify how valuable the arts is to you versus somebody else.
Or how much of it is. So if I'm moving here from Dallas, I can't say how much of my decision was because you have ballet.
Exactly.
Right? Okay. All
right. But what we can quantify is financial impact. And so financial impact from an performing arts community or a performing arts area, center, whatever, is indirect. Meaning the more we have ballet, the more we have the orchestra, the more we have plays, the more we have artists that come here from elsewhere to perform, the more we have that, the more we offer that, the more likely people are going to start to see this as a destination to come to. So people will come here from other places and go, man, this is amazing, this is awesome, I love this place, I'm going to come back here on a weekend and maybe not go to one of these things, right? Same thing for the locals. The locals come down here and they start walking around and they'll spend their money. Very rarely does somebody go directly to the movie theater and watch just the movie.
Got it.
Movie theaters don't make money off movies. They make money off their popcorn, their drink sales, all the additional stuff is where they make their money.
I imagine a lot of restaurants break even on the food and they make the... Matter of fact, we at the Redfish Foundation are playing with an idea for movies downtown that I won't share too much about. But we've been talking with people that do this in other cities, and that's exactly what they told us. Like, you're not making money on the movie, on the tickets. You're making money on popcorn and a beer and
all the
whatever else you can sell. Yeah. Okay.
And so if you take the popcorn idea and you take the drinks idea and you just move it out into their local restaurants, like you may come to the Martin and see a show and then have dinner at Ferrucci's afterwards. Or maybe you wind up over at one of the pubs or, other eateries here, right? That's the idea. So we've now, as we've gotten more technology and as we've gotten AI, we can actually start to pinpoint that a lot better than we have in the past. In the past, you just knew it existed. You just didn't know exactly how much it existed.
Felt it, yeah.
And now we're able to actually kind of pinpoint and say, hey, this many people over this weekend came from out of town into this area. But the reason I bring all that up is because there are companies who are willing to build performing arts centers, but they also want to be able to do the popcorn and the drinks and the
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Well, that's how they make money then.
That's how they make money.
The only way. Okay.
And the number one thing they usually ask for is a hotel. It's usually what they ask for.
We have a hotel.
We have a hotel.
Yeah.
We have an agreement with that company that we won't put a hotel out there.
With you.
Another one.
Another one, right? That is our right.
So that then causes a rub, right?
Oh, okay. Excuse me, Brian. Let me back up.
Yeah.
So not a hotel adjacent to our performing arts center. They want a hotel in the performing arts center.
Wherever. Like they want to be able to build a hotel and use a hotel to subsidize the performing arts center.
Got it.
Right?
Okay.
It may be attached, it may not be attached. I don't know. We haven't gotten to the drawing point.
But they would own and operate and keep the proceeds.
Both.
So
that's the idea, right? That's the popcorn, that's the drinks, is the hotel.
So you didn't know that. Okay.
Right?
Okay.
And hotels make a ton of money. They really do. And it's a great idea. But we have a contract.
We have an agreement, yeah.
And we have an agreement that we won't put another hotel out there.
Okay.
And so then how do you get creative about this?
Yeah.
How do you work through this, right? They would like for something to happen with the property, right? I mean, who wouldn't? So what does that look like?
They were talking about St. Joe.
Yeah, St. Joe.
Yeah, St. Joe, right, sure.
So, but they haven't...
Because they didn't build a hotel for that old building to sit there indefinitely bombed out.
Right.
Right.
And I said, hey, well, are y'all willing to pitch in anything on this or whatever? And they said, look, we're in these businesses.
Sure.
And entertainment is not one of them. We're happy to support y'all on whatever you want to do there, but we don't want to be a part of the decision of what to do there. So it's not so much that they don't want to be involved; it's just that they don't want to.
That's not what they do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They're not in the entertainment business. So for that building or the space rather, what does that look like? Does that look like a performing arts center going back there, and maybe us, the same company that wants to build that there, also then building a hotel elsewhere on city property? I don't know. That's where I'm like, hey, let's be open to be creative about this, because the city has something that's very expensive, and that's land.
Yeah.
Right? So that's what we bring to the table. We say, hey, we have land. You invest your money and your dollars and put it on top of it, and we'll lease it to you for a while. And then you share the revenue with us. And instead of having a performing arts center that was great, wonderful performing arts center, that we put $500,000 into every year.
Because they don't make money.
Because they don't make money. And, they didn't run the air conditioning on there all the time. It costs so much money. So, and I'm not knocking anybody who was a part of it previously, but there's a difference between running a performing arts center for a municipality and running a performing arts center for a business.
Sure.
Right? There's a difference. There's a difference in goals there.
And basically those goals are, in broad strokes, is that if it's a municipal facility, if it can just pay for itself, that's a giant win, right?
That's winning, yes.
That's winning.
That's
but
absolutely
profit,
winning.
like having profit after that is not even a goal.
People will come study you if you make profit.
They'll write books about you, right? If you can
Yeah.
Because you said there's 3 in the country that are like documented profitable.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
So if you can winning in performing arts from a financial standpoint, winning in performing arts is not subsidizing as much, or not having to subsidize as much, right? So if we can get to the point to where the city has a wonderful performing arts center that we've got an agreement with them, so that we can still do the mom and pop stuff, we can still do the local orchestra, the ballet, these local things that are much needed in a community. If we can strike that agreement with them, but they just use our land, which is incredibly expensive, then I think we can have a performing arts center and a hotel in an area that needs a hotel for nothing. Even if we're not making money off of it, we're still winning. Yeah. Because we're not having to spend $500,000.
So now we're not even subsidizing. Like
Correct.
That's a break even for the city. That's a zero net cost.
And that's winning.
Okay, I've never heard it explained. This is why we have you on, Brian. I've never heard it explained like that either. So, and I'm not asking for you to commit on any of this, but paying attention to the Civic Center conversations this whole time and being on groups that were trying to help at least give citizen input. I was on these citizen input groups or whatever they call them.
Yes.
A piece of property that has always intrigued me that I never even knew was the one right behind City Hall. Wasn't that because they had the one down here, The group studied the mall property,
Okay.
and because there was a train that goes by, it's too loud. There's a property, and I may be saying that wrong, right behind City Hall, but
The
there's a
parking lot?
piece of property up there by City Hall that I'm almost positive was proposed as
Yes.
a possible site for the.
Yes.
And my thought has always been, and I've heard others articulate this, performing arts centers, by definition, don't have windows. The whole point is to control all the lighting. And I'm a video guy, and I know, like controlling light, like this big window right here
Yes.
at Berg Law downtown. I want to give a shout out to Jen Berg for letting us use her building. Thank you, Jen and Brandon.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. But this beautiful window that shows Harrison Avenue and our amazing streetscape is a real problem for Greg back here trying to.
Yes.
This is a light source,
Yeah.
right? So performing arts centers don't like natural light sources. You put a big windowless box on the most beautiful waterfront piece of property we
Yeah.
own. It feels weird to me, plus the
does.
parking lot and all that. But if it's like 4 blocks north up there, 5 blocks, I don't know. I'm not asking for it. I'm just saying it's
So-
intriguing to me.
So there's certain properties that we were actually supposed to go to today. Or tomorrow. I was supposed to go meet with a group of investors looking to do something like this. We don't know. I mean, I don't know what the proposal is going to be, but the idea is if we can be creative about it and we can be flexible and say, hey, we own multiple properties across the city. That being one of them. I mean, we don't own all of it. I think Paul Brent owns his section of it. But we have this beautiful piece of property out here. To your point, is that the best place to put a windowless building? No, a hotel would be nice there, but
Sure.
that agreement, we're not going to try to bust up that agreement with St. Joe, right? So what then does that look like, right? I don't know.
Yeah.
But the crazy part about this is I don't have to have the answers, right? What I do want to do is show to these developers that we're willing and open to this discussion, right? And a lot of cities are not open to these types of discussions. And maybe at one point in time, this city wouldn't have been open to those types of discussions, right? But now we are, because I do think that the city does need to have a large performing arts center. I mean, the Martin is going to be great, but it is small.
It is what it is, yeah.
And it's going to be really great for very intimate settings. And on the Tennessee House on the other side of it is going to have event space, and that's going to be awesome, right? We need that too.
We run a film festival. We're very excited about having an extra event space.
It's going to be multi-story event space, which we don't have, right? So I guess just moving forward, I don't know what this is going to look like, and that's okay. I'm okay not knowing, right? I'm okay with us not knowing. What I want to do is just put it out there that, hey, we're open to do business, and we're willing to partner with people. We're willing to do P3s, public-private partnerships. We own land. Come on in, tell us what your idea is. How do you want to make money? But also, how are you going to do the Performing Arts Center? So bringing it over to the Martin, very similar concept. Those 3 buildings that we're refurbishing over there, one of which is going to be a completely brand new building, the Tennessee House.
Yep.
I want to put underneath the purview of one contractor that runs both sides, because the Martin won't make money. So let's let but event centers will.
Yeah.
Event center, let them run the
And
event
there's
center.
like a bar /
The
restaurant
Ritz.
or whatever on this other side. Yeah.
So the Ritz is the red building.
Yep.
And it will have a commercial kitchen in it. I mean, it'll be, if they want to turn it into a restaurant, they could do that. If they want to turn it into a ghost kitchen, they could do that. I mean, it's just sky's the limit, right, for restaurant type work. The idea there is let them decide what needs to happen with that. We just lease the building to them, and they've got to keep the Martin. They got to program the Martin and get it running, right? Then we're not putting money in the Martin every year.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Like
It does to me, yeah. So the idea is that these companies that do this, for it to be profitable for them, they have to have these ancillary things to the arts.
Of course.
In addition to the arts.
Absolutely.
So that, so the idea is that these companies run this, so you're getting a better quality of basically everything, because this is what they do. Cities aren't good at running businesses, and then also too, the city doesn't lose money every year.
Correct.
It's
Cities,
essentially a net zero amenity for the town.
so I am of the opinion that governments don't do things very well. We just don't. Governments don't. There are some things in those categories that we do better than others. Police, fire, roads, commodes, that kind of stuff. Getting clean water to you and dirty water away. Although there's probably a lot of people right now that would say that we need to do a better job at that, right? And I wouldn't disagree with them. But we are in the position that that's what city municipalities are meant to do. They're meant to do those things. Running a marina, running a performing arts center, running these other types of things. I think it's the city's place to try to provide those things. But if we can do so without subsidizing them, I think we're winning big time.
Even better.
Yeah.
And let's be honest, get a better quality of.
Yeah. So to the marina, to the point about the marina, talking with the fellow that we have who runs the marina, he's a great guy. He's doing a great job running the marina. But he told me, he said he tried to get a vending machine because they're not there 24/7, right? He's trying to get a vending machine for bait, which makes sense. That's I don't know if you fish, I fish. I mean that's I'm out of bait or whatever. I forgot my bait. I can go just put a credit card in this thing, get some bait. Took him 6 months to get that through the bureaucracy of the city to get a vending machine. That's a decision that should have just been made by management over like that.
This weekend, have it out there. Yeah.
That's an easy thing. All right, got it. Give me a quote on 2 different vendors. Figure this out. Move forward. Done. That's the kind of decisions that businesses can make. They can make them very fast. They don't have to study anything. They can just do what they feel is best for their customers. And in this case, their customers are the entirety of Panama City.
Yeah. Speaking of marinas and the Martin.
Yeah.
So the commission, almost unanimously, voted to rearrange money and to put it on some big signature projects to include the Martin to stay there. So the headline that kind of hit when everybody was, the city's spending $32 million on the Martin and they took it away from the marinas.
Yes.
Tell me why that's not true.
Oh man. So this is a little complex, a little bit.
Well, that's why we want long form combos. So I want you to explain these things. Yeah.
All right. So the Martin had some money on it from FEMA, right? And then so what you can do with FEMA is you can use a standard project with FEMA, or you can cap the money and move it, or you can cap the money and use it. The big difference.
Cap the money.
Cap the money. Yeah, cap it. So a standard project.
Does that mean like commit it to this project?
No. Let me tell you what a standard is. That'll make more sense.
Yeah. Okay.
A standard project is we don't know how much it's going to cost. FEMA says we think it's going to cost this much, but if you do what FEMA says to do, which is put it back exactly the way it was, and it costs twice as much, FEMA will keep writing that check. They'll keep writing that check. It has to go back exactly the way that it was. Exactly the way that it was. And if you screw up at all, they can claw back every bit of that money. If you cap the money, then FEMA has said, we think it's going to cost you this much to fix it. If you cap it, you don't get any more money.
Okay.
Right? But the clawback is gone. Unless you, of course, do something illegal or try to, if you misuse the funds, they're going to claw back. But the point is that they're not holding you to every, dotted I and crossed T kind of situation.
But they don't keep writing those checks either.
No,
as things
money's
change.
done.
Yeah,
like,
right.
They'll cut you the check and that's it, right? But you got to use it on a FEMA project.
Yeah.
So you can move it to another FEMA project, and that's what's happened with the Ritz, the Martin, and the Tennessee House, and that's kind of what gets lost in the wash with the media is that they just say Martin. And then everybody goes and takes $32 million, divides it by the number of seats in the Martin, and goes, it's a really expensive theater. And it's like, well, yeah, but it's 3 separate buildings. 3 separate buildings, right?
And 2, it sounds like, from what you just described about how these things actually make money, 2 new revenue sources.
Yes,
okay.
Exactly. 2 new revenue sources and a performing arts center when we won't have one for a while, right? Okay. So, and event space.
And event, man. Can I tell you one of our biggest time with Redfish Film Fest, one of the biggest things we spent time on was finding spaces to put people.
Oh, wow.
For stuff. Our largest single, because Lex and I went like door to door and asked, how many people can we fit in your building?
Yeah.
Our largest single space that I could find was the gallery upstairs at the Panama City for the Art, 150 people. That's the biggest place you can put, down where we want to do the fest. So yes, we need we need all that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So those three projects didn't have enough money from FEMA to it had been capped. So and they run through a process called EHP, which takes 18 months to
That's
get
environmental.
through. Yeah, it's
Environmental historical.
Yeah, it's environmental historical preservation. But
The idea is, so it's just, this is an extra level of government review
Yes.
because it's an old building.
Yes.
Is that the idea?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
FEMA had deemed, well, no, not just that.
Okay.
Because FEMA had deemed that it was a historical building, even though it's not on a historical register, by their standards, it was a historical building. All three buildings are historical buildings, or at least one of them was. And so the city at the time wanted to change what was happening there. They wanted to kind of fix some things that needed to be fixed. And anytime you want to do something completely different than what you had before, you have to go through EHP process,
Got it. Okay.
right? Which is an 18-month process. So the money that we had to put on the Panama City Marina, the 15 million or so, that was a standard project for that, would not have rebuilt the marina. It would only have rebuilt the docks. And
So when we say the marina, we don't mean the Marina Civic Center. We're talking about the
marina,
the marina,
actual
the water,
marina.
the boats.
Oh,
Yeah,
the boats.
Yeah.
It would not have been on any of the uplands. We couldn't have used the money on any of the uplands. We would have had to have rebuilt those wet slips and the docks exactly as they were prior to Hurricane Michael. And if we screwed up at all in that process, all that money could be clawed back. Now, those, I liken them to private garages, because if you have a boat and you go lease a spot out there, and I don't get to go out to, unless you give me the code to get onto the.
Oh yeah, no, they were locked down.
They were locked
I remember,
down,
yeah,
right? So
since
that's
I was
not
a kid, yeah.
public access.
Yeah.
So, and we found that when Hurricane Michael hit, we looked back at the who was renting from us, and only 40 of those slips were Panama City residents. Everybody else was from somewhere else.
40 out of how many?
Oh gosh, I think it was 180 total, 186 total. I forget what the total number is, but
Less than a third.
yeah, I mean, it was a small amount of people who actually were from Panama City, or Panama City residents, I should say. Others were from other municipalities, or maybe the county, maybe out of state. I don't know.
Yeah.
But the point is that why am I spending 15 million, potentially more, and putting the city at risk for a clawback that we could potentially screw up? And people beat us in the face all the time. I get it all the time. Y'all spent way too much money on that city hall. You spent way too much money on that city hall. I get it all the time. People tell me y'all screwed up. You spent, which obviously I didn't do, but prior commission,
Yeah.
But some of these folks are okay with us spending 15 million or more on the just wet slips that potentially puts the city at a huge financial risk for clawback.
And literally has little gates with locks on them to keep
Exactly.
the public from getting close to the water.
Exactly.
Because I remember that. I mean, yeah.
I've told this to several people, because usually when I get in this conversation, they say, well, it would have rebuilt the marina. I go, no, it wouldn't have rebuilt the marina. It would have rebuilt only the docks.
Only the private slips.
Only those slips. That's it.
So no
And so-
marina store,
no
no
marina-
gas station, none of that stuff.
None of that. None of it.
Yeah.
None of it. So the point is that to cap that money and move it it was a strategic kind of a thing, because Washington County is facing a $70 million clawback from FEMA. Whoa. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
The state's involved with that, because if they've got to pay it, that's going to
They're going to bankrupt the county.
bankrupt the
And they're going
county.
to come to the state for that.
Yeah. Now what do you do, right?
Yeah.
State may have to bail them out.
Phew.
Is that a situation that I want to put the city in? No, absolutely not. If I knew it was $4 million or so to rebuild those things, and I felt like we could get from A to B, it'd have been a different story. But 15 million plus, I mean, we could be $30 million in that for all we know. You know what I mean?
Well, if we're doing, and I'll say, I'm biased. I'm an arts guy, right?
Yeah.
This is the Redfish Foundation podcast, so we are the arts people. But if we're going to run math on doing total cost divided by number of seats in the Martin, we should also take the $15 million divided by the 180 slips, and how much per slip. But the difference is, in the Martin, the public gets to use it, and the slips, they don't. And by the way, I did not know that until you and I think Alan Branch articulated that when all that hit, and I was just reading and trying to learn like everybody else. That was the first time I'd heard it articulated like these. We're talking. This money goes to private boat slips. Do you want to use city money to go to private boat slips? And bless them, they have boats and they have the money to. Fair enough. I mean, but does that need to be on the signature city property on the water? You know, with that money.
So for me, it was looking at it. I'm a numbers and data guy. I mean, I enjoy the arts, but I really numbers and data at heart. And for me, it was lowering attack surface. I mean, that goes back to military days. You know, if you have a potential for conflict, then it's best to lower your attack surface and make it very, very small. And so looking at that, I was looking at that was a huge.
And by the way, when you're saying
risk.
that, because the first time you said that, I think you said lower your attack surface. So your vulnerable real estate, reduce your attack surface.
Yeah,
got it.
Boxers, they throw their hands up in front of their face, right? Like you got to keep your hands up, right? Tuck your chin, lower your attack surface. Keep it where you don't get hit in the chin, right? And that's how I saw that whole situation. I'm looking at Washington County, $70 million clawback for a FEMA project that they had that was approved. And I'm looking that a potential future of this city could be being 100% bankrupt because we wound up $30 million into the hole on a FEMA project on just boat slips.
100 and change boat slips.
And now they're clawing it back because we used the wrong screws, we used the wrong boards, and we didn't get proper approval. And when the government wants money, they take it.
Sure.
You know, and when you need money out of them, it takes a while to get it back. So for me, that was pretty much a no-brainer because I'm not putting the city in that situation, just not doing it. Especially when we got a partner, who's at the table actively discussing with us, investing their own money into developing a marina that probably needed changes. Now remember, if we would have used the FEMA money, we would have gone back to the 1960s design.
Yeah, with the little round top things and all that.
I mean, in the 1960s, boats were a lot smaller too. Sure. And I'm not saying that we don't need to have slips for small boats, but we probably need less of those. And
I think everybody can say everything has changed since the 1960s.
Absolutely.
I mean, everything is different. Yeah. Okay.
And two marina harbor masters, if you call them, the folks that run the marinas that have run that in the past have actually said, there needed to be some major design changes if ever needed to be. It definitely needed to not go back the same way it was.
And a lot of risk on the city in that scenario.
For very little gain.
And so the idea, is like we were talking about with the Performing Arts Center, is that there are private companies that specialize in building marinas and running the marinas and maintaining them and all that stuff.
Yes.
And so the idea is transfer that. That's the argument for privatization of anything. Transfer the risk onto those people because they're putting their money in and their staff and their take it off of the city.
Yeah.
And put that money onto something that can be better. Okay.
So the other piece to this too is the downtown marina. People go back and they look at the books on the downtown marina. They go, it made a ton of money. Why would you give it over to a partner? And it's like, did you see it before Hurricane Michael? It didn't make a ton of money. Yeah, it had a lot of revenue, but zero of that revenue went back into maintenance. Zero went back into maintenance, and it needed a lot of maintenance. Sure. It needed a ton of maintenance.
It did.
So when you look at it from that perspective, businesses tend to do a good job. At least the successful businesses tend to do a good job of saving some of that money or building overhead into their pricing or, kind of realizing that future, we're going to need money for the future. We're going to have to replace a roof. We're going to have to replace an air conditioning system. We're going to have to do something, right? Sure. So we need to put money away. That didn't happen at the Panama City Marina. What happened was St. Andrews Marina made so much darn money, they would just transfer money whenever they needed to do maintenance. They would just transfer money from St. Andrews Marina over to Panama City Marina.
Got it. So one marina was subsidizing the other.
Absolutely.
Got it.
And so that's where it's like, hey, we can still partner with somebody and still make money off of this. And is it going to match the same amount of money that we were making before? Probably not, because they're actually putting money back into the maintenance of it, so we continue to have great marinas.
Yeah, that's the when you run a business, just the basic difference between gross and net. I mean,
exactly.
That's just like you could gross a lot of revenue, and if you eat it all, you got nothing.
The problem we run into when the city runs something is politics. That's what you run into. You run into anytime you go to raise rates on something that people are, comfortable with. they show up in mass and they tell you how horrible that you are, and they're going to
Yeah,
vote for somebody
sure.
else, and that scares some people. But it turns into this huge negative thing, and so you wind up with not many elected officials willing to do that.
Yeah, that's why I said you all have this plate of about a half a dozen once in a lifetime decisions you're trying to make, and you have this cluster of them that you're trying to. So, one last thing on the Martin. When people see that, first of all, I think it's good to reiterate. We're talking when we say the Martin.
You're talking about all three buildings?
We're talking about three buildings,
okay,
right? There's groups started calling it the Martin Multiplex Project, groping for a word that says this is bigger than a theater. It's three separate buildings. I remember explaining this to my dad. He asked me, he said, "Aren't you involved a little bit? Don't you know about that stuff?" I said, "A little bit. I can tell you what I know." And he said, "That seems like a lot of money for a theater," because I used to do plays there, so he knows the theater.
Yeah. And
when I explained to him the three buildings and the thing, he was like, "Oh, that doesn't seem too bad."
Yeah.
Like it started to make sense to him. Now, $32 million is a lot of money,
That's a ton
whatever.
of money, yeah.
But the idea was out there that like somehow this was coming out of general fund, $32 million to do this. Tell me, break that money down for us a little bit.
All right, so I told you before, Ward 3, we just want a road repaved, right?
Right.
And one of the criticisms we had was this beautiful cobblestone right out here, right?
Yeah.
There was $5 million used in this portion of it that could have been used elsewhere, right? And so one of my jobs that I see at City Hall is to make sure that that doesn't happen again. Not that cobblestones don't happen, but that we're not putting local tax dollars into one specific part of the city while others suffer. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Now, I'm not opposed to beautifying this area. I'm absolutely not. It's wonderful. It looks great. So what that means is that the money that goes into here needs to come from somewhere else. And it doesn't need to be able to be used in my ward to repave roads. So if we can get money in, and here's the thing, there's no grant money out there really to repave roads. There's just not.
Right.
Like every city on the face of the planet would be clamoring for that, right?
Sure they would.
But there are specific grants for downtown areas. There's specific grants for revitalization in areas that are depressed, and this is still considered a depressed area. There's because of the foresight that has happened for this area, it does qualify for a lot of different grants. And so as we move forward, that money's coming from the feds. It's not coming from the city's coffers. We have a $70 million budget, but we have $330 million in projects that we're doing right now, and the vast majority of that is being done through grants. It's being done through grants, it's being done through FEMA dollars, it's being done through just various other loan type systems. There's a loan system that the state of Florida, which is a really nice system. They loan you the money, you do the project. If everything works out well, then they forgive 25% of it right off the bat. They just forgive that money, and that's an excellent program, right? But hold your feet to the fire and make sure you do the project properly. So just using those different tools, they're not local tax dollars. Now, some people would say, well, you should send that money back. We shouldn't be spending that money here. You need to be focused on this over here. And my argument back to that, and it's not I'm not trying to build a straw man here. It's just more of literally people have levied that against me. Is if we send it back, that money's not going to come back to us as taxpayers. It's going to be spent somewhere else. It will be spent somewhere else. And when you send money back, you hamstring any future attempts to get that same type of grant money in. That makes sense?
Yeah, so you're not giving it back once, you're essentially giving it back in perpetuity.
All future attempts are now scuttled.
Yeah.
So as we get grants to put in cobblestones down here, I'm very vocal with my constituents that your local tax dollars are not paying for this. Yeah. But this money also couldn't be used in Ward 3 either, because that's a huge question I ask. So that's my reputation with city staff is just don't even present anything to Grainger if it could be used in Ward 3. Just don't even bother. Mm-hmm. Don't even bother trying to spend this dollar anywhere else in the city if it can't be used up there. Yeah. So this goes back to that I felt like somebody wasn't fighting for us, right? The Ward 1, Ward 2, and Ward 4 all have major projects. They all have major things that are going in, road infrastructure, all this stuff is going in there. And then Ward 3, I mean, we don't have a lot, and we need that kind of infrastructure replacement, which is very expensive. So I've got a couple of irons in the fire on that. I've got a deal with Sweet Bay that I'm hoping that the other commissioners will look at and see that it is a great deal for our citizens. It's a great deal for Sweet Bay. It's a great deal for the city, and it's a great deal for the citizens that, in the surrounding area to help set aside money similar to a CRA. We're like your home. There's money every time you pay taxes. There's money set aside to fix stuff in in that Millville area. We don't have anything like that up in Ward 3. We don't have anything like that at all. And so this would establish something similar to where we could use some of that money and earmark it for tax or for infrastructure.
Okay.
So
that's the deal. So that's sort of a big priority you're working on right now is to, because you're in. I mean, I know some of your neighborhoods are older, but they're not like the Cove old, right? They're not Millville old. A lot of the newest developments in town are in your ward up there. Yeah.
You ever bought something fairly new, or you ever had something that was pretty darn old and it lasted 20, 30, 40 years maybe? Maybe you got an antique and it's 100 years old and it's still great and it works. But the newer version of that only lasts about 10 years.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so we have that problem in the Forest Park area.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm not. I mean, the Cove absolutely has issues. It absolutely has problems, and they need to be addressed. I'm not taking anything away from them. What I am saying though is that there was some new technology back in the '60s that got put into the Forest Park area, got put into Candlewick area, and that technology is now failing.
Yeah.
Now our technology we have now lasts a lot longer, but that plastic and whatnot that got put in is brittle and it is failing. And it is failing at the same rate as what the Cove has. So
okay, good to know.
It's one of those situations where it's like I'm not here saying we need to spend money here and not spend money there. We need to spend money in both. So how do we generate money in one area so that we can use that money there? So when we do get money in, I'm not going to need it over here. We can use it over there. The city as a whole, for the most part, is in the same boat, with the exception of the areas that the CRAs are in, right? Which is, they need millions and millions of dollars. So, when people just know the roads need to be repaved, right? But the problem is, a lot of times, it's not necessarily the road that's failing, it's the infrastructure under the road, the water and the sewer. So that's why you get the cave-ins, because the sewer is failing, and so you've got a cave-in, so it just sucks all the sand out from underneath the asphalt, and you get a cave-in. Yep. Fixing everything is $1 million a mile.
$1 million per mile fix infrastructure.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
and I would imagine, do you know how many? I don't put you on the spot, but how many lane miles you have roughly in your? I mean, you have the biggest land-wise.
I do.
Right, which means you probably have. But anyway, it's a lot. It's a lot of money.
The Panama City North doesn't require any major infrastructure issues.
Okay.
Like, that's all brand new. Every bit of that there is brand new.
Okay.
Sweet Bay is brand new. It doesn't require.
True. Yeah.
It's not going to need anything for 20 years. So if we can tap Sweet Bay, because those houses they're expensive.
Yeah.
They're probably some of the most expensive houses in all of Panama City. I mean, obviously you can find some houses right there in Bunkers Cove that are more expensive, but
they're going to be on the water though.
They're very, very few and far between, right? When you start counting them up, Sweet Bay Home, I think the minimum you can get into Sweet Bay right now, I think is $380,000, and that's for a duplex.
Yeah.
The tax revenue that comes off of those homes is a lot higher than the tax revenue that comes off of most other homes.
Sure.
Because, I mean, how long have you owned your home?
22 years.
Yeah, so your percentage doesn't go up, but every...
Yeah, and I have, no, it doesn't.
Right? So Sweet Bay, we're talking brand new homes. And so the tax revenue that comes off them is disproportionate to the rest of the city, for the most part.
Right, so my 1,800 square foot house, that was built in 1978, it's in good shape.
Yeah.
possibly have the same property taxes as a brand new home in Sweet Bay, simply because they started at a different place.
And when you
Right.
start looking at the average age of the home and how long somebody has owned that home, now we had to have quite a turnover here recently but when you still look at it, Sweet Bay homes are still kind of an outlier because they're so expensive. So they generate more, they're assessed at a higher rate. And so, but the argument to some people is, well, I'm paying a higher rate. I'm paying, it is the same rate, it's the same millage rate. They're paying more money.
Right.
Why am I not receiving more things? And that's not how government works, right?
Sure.
But if we can tap into that and say, hey, Sweet Bay, if you can build homes faster and you can accelerate that, there's a certain number that they can hit that will actually make more money by them accelerating. We'll actually make more money in tax revenue faster than if they continued at the rate they're at now.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Sure, yeah. More homes, more people buying them, yeah.
Very similar to a manufacturing company saying, hey, I'm looking at buying some software, but this software has enterprise agreement that I got to sign up for every year. And that's a cost, right? And so as I manufacture the thing, I've got to pay for more licenses of that software. And so you look at the numbers and you just look at, what does the formula look like, and you can kind of extrapolate out how much money you should be making and what's a good number. If a company makes X amount of widgets every year and they were able to give up a certain percentage of their profit to be able to produce 50% more, that may math out to where it's like a no-brainer.
Yeah.
That makes more sense. We'll make way more money doing that than, right? Is that
Yeah.
concept?
It does. That's clever. I mean, in an interesting strategy in a newer part of town than versus like an old part of town. So
It's
okay.
using the same formula we used for the Bay City point. It's just on TIF dollars and not on merchant fee.
Gotcha.
It's just changing the revenue source so that they can continue to build faster. Same thing with Bay City Point. We just use merchant fee. They get back merchant fee because they built out Bay City Point. And I think a lot of people would tell you Bay City Point is very successful because it used to be a junkyard.
Sure. Oh yeah,
Right.
it was my whole life. So looking, you've been a commissioner now for a little while, and
Yeah, a minute.
you're getting this thing figured out. The what excites you most about what you see going on in town right now, whether it's in your ward or the city generally or whatever? What makes you want to keep doing this?
It goes back to that. I want to serve. So what keeps me going day to day is the helping the individual, helping the business owner, helping I'm intrinsically motivated just naturally. I've been blessed with that. But what gives me those dopamine hits, what kind of gives me the keep going kind of thing is when somebody reaches out and they're like, hey, this I got this issue, what have you, and I can solve it. And it's very easy fix. A lot of these are just very, very easy fixes. Sometimes they don't even know who to go to, and that's okay, right? But I really, truly enjoy helping people. But what I also at a deeper level enjoy is we're making decisions, like you said, that are going to affect the city for the foreseeable future. I mean, 60 years. And so the same folks who decided to bond and levy another tax against the citizenry to build out that whole area where the Civic Center is and the marina and build City Hall and a library and build all that out, there was probably some weight to that as well. Knowing that all that was going to be brand new and it was going to be how the city facilities the city was going to have moving forward for decades and decades on end. So I don't know exactly what Panama City is going to look like when I'm done with serving, but what in my mind would be a successful stint for me is to where the city is not financially burdened more than what it was prior. If we can get to the point to where the city has more revenue sources, less subsidization of things, but we still have those things and we still offer those things. And we can lower the tax on ad valorem. I'm a big fan of, if you've bought a home, if you've bought a home, you shouldn't have to pay to continue to own your home, right?
Yeah. I call it an existence tax.
Yeah.
I exist, therefore I owe you money.
But I can't obviously I can't do anything on my own. The other commissioners have to agree, but we can't just change it overnight. You know, we won't kill everything as we move forward. But if I can figure out a way to get us at least to where the city's not got an ad valorem, then I think that would be a grand slam. I mean, that would just be a huge wonderful thing.
Yeah. Better town, more amenities for less money out of pockets of locals. I mean,
yes.
You can pull off that magic trick. Yeah, that'd be.
But you say that for the longest time, the locals didn't want tourism, and some of them still don't.
Oh yeah, and yeah. Fair enough. By the way, and I that I can understand that. I mean, if you lived here long enough and you lived in Panama City Beach in a double wide trailer, 100 feet from the Gulf of Mexico, and then all of a sudden now there's Wonderworks and there's all that stuff. I could see where they at least question it.
And I could see where, and that was the point that I made to this marina thing. I think that a lot of folks were completely against us moving the money off that because they thought that a contractor would come in there and put Ferris wheels out there and make it, Coney Island and it's like,
turn it into Destiny.
No, that's not what we want. We want that local, small, quaint feel. We want people to be able to walk, all the way down Harrison Avenue, turn the corner, and look out and see a wonderful marina. We don't want, necessarily, any commercial kind of.
Well, Jen Vigil says it. Jennifer Vigil, who's the director of Destination Panama City, to me says it best. She says, tourists will come to a town that the locals like to live in.
Yes.
You don't have to, like if we love our town and we do, and so it sounds like that's what, build a town the locals love, and then everything else will take care of itself.
If you look at, and this isn't a great example anymore, but what a lot of people, beach people usually go to the mountains, and mountain people usually go to the beach, right?
Of course, sure.
Gatlinburg and Pigeon Forge. Gatlinburg for the longest time was the kind of the local quaint. They had their attractions, but they were kind of that 1960s, 1950s feel.
A little downtown.
Yeah, they had it was a quaint kind of a situation, and as I understand it, Pigeon Forge folks wanted to get in on that action, and Gatlinburg folks said, "No, we're going to keep it the way we want it." And so Pigeon Forge just kind of blew up with all the commercials.
It's Panama City Beach in the mountains, is what I call it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's exactly what it feels like.
And I'm not knocking either one of those places, but I don't think that. I think we need to kind of go the road of Gatlinburg, but not necessarily go with some of the same flashiness they have either.
Yeah.
I think we need to keep it less flashy, more coastal, more. If locals want to be here, then tourists will want to come visit too, right? So. Dunedin, have you been there?
Yeah.
That's a nice, quaint little downtown.
It's a nice model. I think that's what most locals, at least the ones none of us want to. Listen, we live in Panama City because we don't want to live on Panama City Beach.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with Panama City Beach. Don't get me wrong. Just different customers, different way of life, different things.
Yeah.
So, that's a fair point. So we're not trying to make Panama City Beach. We're not trying to make Orlando. We're trying to make Panama City.
To give an alternative.
Brian, right? I appreciate you taking all this time and coming down and doing this.
Thanks for having me.
Because just for the listeners to know, like he didn't know what he was getting into. Just came in. So we appreciate you taking so much time and explaining things in such detail. Because that's why we started this podcast. Because people. It's just hard to get it out in a little soundbite, the complexities and nuances of actually running a city. So we appreciate you very much for coming on.
Well, thank you for having me.